Hello, everyone. Great to meet you. My name is Jasmin Jodry. I'm a creative director in immersive experience design based in New York. And I wanted to thank you for inviting me to share my work today. I'm really excited to be here. I blend art and entertainment to create transformational immersive experiences that encourage participation and inspire social connection. I partner with clients in culture, tech, wellness, and mostly entertainment these days. Today, we're going to explore my passion. I love immersive experiences. I don't care if the word immersive has been abused lately. You know, it's still the best word to describe it, even though we're looking for alternatives. But just to jump in and define what I mean by immersive experiences, I see them as shared journeys that blend storytelling, world building, performance, invisible technology, and game mechanics. I think these experiences foster emotional connections, build meaningful memories, enable agency, and potentially trigger transformation. My favorite ones are story living experiences where participants actively engage within the narrative, promoting social well-being. By creating rich and playable worlds, these encounters facilitate connection, learning, and personal growth. They transport participants to unimaginable worlds, bringing joy, excitement, and encouraging play. I see them almost as a slider from entertainment somewhere to social wellness. I feel like each of these experiences is somewhere along the slider that I design. I see them acting as catalysts for emotional processing and societal reflection in a playful way, in an entertaining way. But I think through story living, we craft impactful moments that inspire positive change. And I love creating magical worlds that give people joy and excitement while encouraging play. I see them as sense-saturated hybrid adventures that put the audience front and center, fostering human connection and leading to life-changing shifts. So that's my take on immersive experiences. It's not Van Gogh. Over the past 4 years, I've designed 7 experiences, and today I'm excited to share my process with you and a few examples. So the process slides are really ugly, but I felt like it's just sincere to show you how the stuff is made, you know, so they're not designed, it's just raw from the trenches. I do have a process, and, you know, first when I started designing this maybe 5 years ago, I didn't so much have a process, and now I think the patterns sort of emerge, and I see like there is a bit of a strategy behind how I do these now, and I wanted to share this with you.
Hey,
So
Jasmine, hey, could I jump in for a second? Is it
yeah.
possible for you to share like the full screen or expand your deck?
Oh, yeah. Can you see it here?
I don't know. I
F
think that's good.
F4.
Is that good?
I think it's good enough. Let's roll with it.
Okay, great. Awesome. So I always start with the outcome, the why. You know, why are we making this experience? Why should anybody care? And for me, it's really about sort of empathy, shared interaction, creativity, memories, happiness, and transformation, ultimately leading to a better society. In each project, I seek a humanitarian outcome, a catalyst for emotional processing that makes it memorable and anchors the project on that foundation. From there, I go to the vehicles, the experience design, the how, you know, how do we achieve coming to such an outcome? For me, we make audiences feel a certain way through play, awe, participation, imagination, emotional and social connection, and authentic self-expression. And then from there, I go to the tools, the what, you know, what elements, what sensory stimuli and affordances do we need for audiences to react in a certain way and engage? For me, that's storytelling, world building, performance, technology, and game mechanics. And then I want to share 5 examples of commercial projects and their whys, the reasons why they matter. Each project is anchored in such a humanitarian outcome, making it memorable and playful, impactful. For a musical artist, I recently envisioned an immersive experience that unites people through music, manifesting his mission and highlighting his role as a social activist. I created a story living experience to raise empathy and tolerance by showing audiences they embody elements of two seemingly opposing worlds, challenging their first view when they get into these worlds. For Avatar, The Way of Water, I partnered with Eccentric to craft a story living experience where the audiences visit Polyphemus and explore Pandora's mesmerizing oceans and biosphere amongst the Na'vi. And for Ancient Olympia Common Grounds, I partnered with Listen to creative direct an interactive website, app, and HoloLens experience that digitally preserves ancient Olympia's cultural and archaeological heritage. Using Microsoft technology, it empowers guests to travel back in time and explore how the ancient Olympic Games fostered common ground through values like peace, harmony, cooperation, equality, fairness, and respect. I also designed an interactive multisensory environment with projection mapping, haptics, scent, and spatial sound to immerse visitors in the rainforest, instilling love for its diverse vegetation and wildlife with a hope of inspiring climate change awareness. So all of these are hooks, right? When you have the why, you have the hook. Then we go to the how, and we go to the structure. How do you structure it? What's the narrative arc? How do you get this message that you have into the audience? What interactions will the audience engage in? How many interactions are feasible? There are many different arcs and structures. Hero Journey, you may have heard about it, is a classic one, but it's also being challenged lately. But for example, this was an example. It was a 45-minute experience with 3 scenes. I broke it down into 5-minute chunks because, coming from generative graphics, I know how to work in 5 minutes, where 45 minutes seemed really intimidating at first. And we could afford 12 interactions. So I had to find a way to nest them cleverly in the experience so it doesn't feel repetitive. It's not only the narrative and emotional arc, we need to think about the entire guest journey. So sometimes this encompasses way more than just the arc. It includes the pre-experience, right? What happens during the experience and the post-experience. Pre-experience is anywhere from ticket purchase, and perhaps if it's app-driven as well, the guests have to download the app, and then there's some comms, anywhere from the thank you, pre-show, or day of emails. Upon arrival, the experience unfolds then through various activation touch points. And after departing, guests potentially receive a takeaway. They may complete a survey, right? And they have their social shares. So all of that is part of the guest journey, and it wants to be carefully crafted. And then there's the budget, of course. When assessing the budget, it's essential to consider the business model and ideally conduct a feasibility study. Key budget considerations here are audience and cast size and their ratio. So then you can see, I personally really like one-on-one experiences, but it really depends on that ratio, right? Can you actually afford one-on-ones, or do you need your performers in the main scene and they can't bugger off and do special stuff on the side, right? What is the duration of the experience? What is the ticket pricing tiers? What is the revenue per show? What is the frequency the show is shown per week and the overall run, right? Does it run for a year, longer, 3 months? What is the venue cost, the cast costs, and the production budget? 2 years ago, I wrote an entire show like that from scratch. And these were like important things I learned that we have to consider from the beginning onwards. Otherwise, we're not making anything. And then I usually go, okay, now it's like time for the mood to really take that idea. We have a bit of an idea of the narrative arc. How can I really make this salient and sear? What are the aesthetics? What are my ideas for music? What are sensory stimuli? What might be techniques I want to use? So I usually go to Miro and Pinterest, and I make a Pinterest board just intuitively following what I think it should be. And then afterwards, I go to Miro and I start putting together, what is the narrative? What are the interactions? What is the tech? And then I see slowly like paths forming. And then I consider like, what are the interactions, right? What is the interaction design? What can participants actually do? And then also how I get them to participate. And here I really feel like, if you think about the inging words in an experience, you know, that's the stuff participants remember. Like, did they dance? Did they do a drawing? Did they have to go to a stranger and talk about X? You know, did they have to go to a screen and interact with it? Did they have to make something out of clay? Did they have to put an object from here to here? Or did they have to solve a puzzle or look for something or go on a little mystery? You know, I feel like that those are the things when you look at the reviews later that the people will really talk about. They sear and etch memories into their minds that they will share later. So it's important to design for that from the beginning and really empower the people. If they have 3 or 4 major things they can do with an experience, they will probably remember that experience well. Then it's all about, you know, the world building, the art direction of the spatial design. And sometimes I design stuff that has physical design, sometimes digital design, sometimes it's a hybrid. But it's like art directing what goes where in terms of composition. But then if you're designing for physical spaces, you also need to put this palm tree here and this here. You know, this was a scene in Unreal, and I had to look in the Unreal shop. What are the cool palm trees we can buy? And I sort of nested it into the design. So the Unreal team really knew exactly what to put where. Then it's also working with the spaces, making them economic. You know, when you design an experience, you have so many ideas. Oh, and this could be a really big room. And then later, you know, the producers will be like, well, you got one really big room and you're only using it for one scene. Guess which one we're going to cut, you know? So of grouping the scenes and really making sure that you're economic with your spaces and that there's a reason you need this space. You may want to use it for multiple scenes. And then working with performers, and this is something I've been learning lately, you know, if I have 10 performers and 50 audience members, and the thing is 75 minutes long, I almost had to make Excel spreadsheets, you know, where is the performer at which point in time? And there you see like one-on-ones are really expensive, right? The purple and the red are one-on-ones. If I take performers out of the main scenes or the smaller scenes to facilitate one-on-ones, I lose a lot of performers, right? So then it also becomes, if you want to have one-on-ones, what are other ways you can create them? You know, can you make them through tech or through sound, or are there other ways? Because one-on-ones with a performer are really expensive. Then it's about play testing, and this just amazed me. So lately I created a world, and then we had a play test where I just briefed performers pretty short on the world and then just let them interact in it. You know, I asked them, what does this world feel like? What do you want to do in this world? Are you talking? Are you not talking? And they came up with the craziest shit that I never thought would happen. And it was so nice to see, you know, when we sit there with our presentation decks, we design in our minds. And then having people validate your concept with their bodies, just reacting intuitively, was so helpful. So I really vouched to myself that I will always work this way. And then when I was thinking about it, it really doesn't matter whether you work with performers or with software. It's really the same way, you know, play testing or prototyping, the iterative process, gaining feedback. Like here on the left, it was frames we designed in Photoshop. And then the frame in the middle is once you stick it into a generative system, it just pumps up lots of flowers, thousands of them. You can't do that in Photoshop. You would sit there for days. And then the challenge became, how do you art direct that stuff? You know, so I had to sit there until ages very long to write these like super detailed JSON files where it's like this color with this and this and this, because now you have a system and you kind of need to tame the beast and make sure whatever the system spits out looks good, right? So that was the different challenge. Yeah, and now I thought we could jump into examples and see this applied. I'll show you one story living experience. This was a pitch we did for Avatar, The Way of Water, together with Eccentric. And then I'll show you 2 commercial projects and something I'm working on currently. So if I think about this one, right, what is the objective? What was the purpose? The brief here was to create a 60-minute ticketed immersive experience that it takes the movie's IP and extends it into real life. Really, like, what do the fans want to do? How do they want to explore Pandora? Like, what is the wish fulfillment they have with that IP, so we can deeply immerse them and emotionally connect them? And I found that by connecting the guests emotionally and socially, we can really hook the content more and build a totally different fandom. And on my own note, I stuck in here a bit the sort of empathy for biophilia and the interconnectedness that I think the Na'vi live out, that is so beautiful. So I'll show you how in a minute. This experience had 5 different zones. I'll show you my favorite ones. In the onboarding, you just entered a room with a big polyphemus planet where you paired your phone with a planet to download the app, unlocking content for the journey. Then there was a big LED tunnel where we strapped the visitors on the sides with belts. And then in the middle was like a smoke thingy. So it was a simulation for cryo-freezing as they traveled in the ISV Venture Star to the planet Polyphemus. It included temperature drops, sound effects, smoke machines, and video footage. When they arrived, we leveraged the entire LED panel to show the beautiful footage. In the exobiology lab, guests designed their own full-body avatar. This was app-driven with a protobox for social shares. And then there was an aquarium where people used the gyroscope in the phone and the phone as a beacon to attract fish, sort of play with it, generatively affect the fish. And there was a bit of a day parting with whales, manta ray parade, the dolphin dance, and bioluminescence. So the audience could always come back to the space during the experience. Then we had the Tree of Voices. We had all the 3 trees, Tree of Voices, Home Tree, and the Tree of Souls. And then the Tree of Voices, the guests can listen to Na'vi stories from ancestor voices through directional sounds by grabbing these vines. Then we had interactive vines where they could swing that spreaded bioluminescence through the experience. And in Home Tree, we made it climbable, also for adults, because I think it's nice to have something playful. And it provided a nice sort of chill space in the experience. And at night, we had these VIP sleepovers where we had hammocks in Home Tree, and people for a special ticket could sleep in Home Tree with Na'vi story time. And then we had the Tree of Souls here on the left. It was a physical tree with an LED wall surrounding, and you could sit in the middle. And normally we had these Atokirina seats, these generative seats on the walls of the LED wall. And through your presence and dwell time, you would attract them. You can manipulate them and release these sacred seats that are supposed to bring fortune to you. And then on the hour, we would see people on these spots around the tree and give them these glowing orbs. We could have done it with an app too, but I would prefer these physical orbs. And the tree emanated a breath that you as the participant joined into. So you were all breathing at the same time, which affected your heart rate, and the orbs measured your heart rate. So once your heart rate synced at a certain frequency, the orb would glow. And if the orb glowed, a respective part of the LED wall would glow too. And all this was for you to experience emotional and social connection with others in the same way that the Na'vi connected with Iva in Pandora, in sort of their biophilic ecosystem. So I thought it was a nice way to leverage commercial IP, but also create a social well-being exercise that really emphasizes what is nice about that IP with the biophilia. And perhaps, I hope it would spark social reflection on our society. Yeah, now the next 2 projects are more commercial and more experiential, I want to say. But what they have in common with the story living experiences, these are not ticketed immersive experiences you walk through. But what they have in common is they also have a humanitarian hook that we were able to leverage to sort of hook the project on, so that it's creating impact. This was a pitch with Gensler, redesign the digital experience for the Delta terminal at LaGuardia Airport here in New York. And we were asked to apply Delta's mission, "No one better connects the world," to make so the guests make better emotional connections to Delta, themselves, others, and their environment through their journey from curb to gate. And here, in order to make better connections, we really looked at what is the curb to gate experience look like now. You know, if you look at the check-in, the security, people are really stressed and nervous. It's not pleasant, right? And then when you get to the gate, they're really impatient and so bored. So how can we medicate this narrative arc into a positive one? How can we convert it by leveraging experiential design? And that's kind of my philosophy now, that I think experiences can really be medicine or therapeutic in the way that we can leverage experiential activation to make things better. So for that, you see the guest journey here on the departure. We place these activations that I'll show you in a minute. We place them strategically at the biggest points of conflict to enhance and make the journey elevated. We did it for departure as well as arrival. So some of these experiences, we started on the outside of the airport. We called it the brand beacon. It was these LED markers, and whenever a plane took off, there was a little swoosh through it, and you had an app and you could see which flight just took off. There was the welcome portal for the VIP, and then the welcome portal for the general public. It was almost like the Delta logo as a little paper plane that could be illuminated in the dark. And then in the heart of the building, going all the way from baggage check over security and check-in, we designed this circular ecosystem. We called it the digital oasis, with a digital forest that grew up. It was real plants and LEDs that grew up, then a data bridge that formed these natural patterns driven by data, and then it came down as a digital waterfall. And that was really in the building. So you felt the life in the building, bringing the outside in. And the digital forest, I've done a couple of projects now connecting LED and florals. I really like that combination. So these were all real living plants we brought in. And then the data bridge had these sort of scaled screens that leveraged the data and turned it into hyper naturalistic sort of animations. And the digital waterfall that came back down to the baggage claim, connecting it. And then all the gates were sort of very minimal, but color coordinated, so you can easily orient yourselves. Next one, also commercial. And for that one, I want to say, okay, if you work with a financial client, it doesn't get more corporate than that. But what we did for the financial client, it was creating a digital content system in their HQ in Virginia, my first evergreen system. It was 24/7. And finally seeing that in there, it was all like these big neon flowers and all these data things, felt really crazy. When you see it on the laptop now, it may not seem like, you know, we've seen nice graphics, information graphics before, but when you saw it on the site, it really felt new. You know, imagine this is a big headquarters where everybody runs around in a navy blue costume. The brief here, I worked with Hush on this. The brief was to excite and greet the employees and the partners and visitors to the Capital One campus and highlight the success of Capital One through visualizing their data. And it was also for the employees to create an inspiring work environment that somehow made it feel more personal. So our solution was that to really give the building a heartbeat and use these artistic screens throughout the building to bring the building alive. And again, here we looked at the narrative arc, right? And we figured out what are really active times, what are more focused times where people need to work, and what happens at night. And this one was challenging. We had like 2 months from start to finish, which is a very short time for evergreen systems. So we figured out 2 themes. We had the sort of individual seed, this data stuff, and the garden, all these flowers. And then we figured out how to create 4 modes and sort of milk similar themes in different colors and different shapes. So we could deploy it to 3 different screens. The screens were very different, had totally different resolutions, and yeah, tough. No obvious common denominator there. And then we wrote, for the storytelling, we wrote data mapping, right? Like when employees swiped in, they saw this shape. Originally, we wanted to base it on real-time data, but what I've learned when you work with these big institutions, getting live data is hard. First, everybody is excited about it, and the minute the legal team joins the show, you get pre-baked PDFs at best. I have yet to see a job where we actually get live data. Yeah, so we leveraged whatever we could from the PDFs to create interesting ways that related to their storytelling. So here the employees swiped in and you saw the busyness of the branch. Many individuals created these bigger teams. Then the extrusions showed the highlights of the teams. And later we created these landscapes as each branch was ever evolving. And then for the flowers and the leaves, I thought it was nice. We did it whenever the stock price was up, you had more flowers than leaves. And whenever the stock price was down, you had more leaves than flowers. And if the stock price had a crazy peak, we wanted these butterflies to come out. And if it had a crazy low peak, we had little rain that came on. So I thought it was a very sort of human way to show the data. And when the employees walk in, they already know what's happening to the stock that day. Yeah, and here are some of the screens. There was this really large screen here. And then some of the flower frames, they were quite cool, and you could kind of see it at night too when you were driving by. The next project is an immersive wellness experience I'm currently working on. And I'm envisioning the rise of immersive wellness centers, not just in bustling cities, but also as nomadic traveling experiences, cycling through various wellness oases. I see these transformative encounters could span an array of disciplines, anywhere from light and sound therapies to cacao ceremonies, ritual work, breath work, yoga, meditation, and creative retreats. I'm interested in creating immersive experiences that serve as these transformative catalysts, acting as entertainment with a humanitarian anchor, almost like social medicine. And I like how they can turn ordinary moments into profound experiences that integrate entertainment with essential health benefits for holistic well-being. And for me, there are 5 things really important in this space. The first one is crafting emotional connection, really designing for emotion, creating presence and embodiment for the audience as a foundation for them to participate, creating awe and human empowerment that way. I feel like if they're not present in their bodies, they're not going to participate. Like you can't ask them to do crazy shit if you haven't grounded them at the beginning. So it's really important to get more out of them. The second is to create really meaningful and shared experiences. I feel like, especially now after the pandemic, we're also disconnected, that immersive experiences can really have some impact there and help. And in that notion, it's important to design for belonging and evoking collective effervescence, creating collective spaces for reflection and contemplation, but with intention. The third point is really choreographing multisensory design to give people salient sensations that create unforgettable memories. Sometimes this means sensory simplicity, right? We can't scream louder and louder and try to make an impact. Sometimes it's taking things away and really creating salient focus. And I'm really interested in choreographing multisensory designs. Sometimes it's really about the sum of all parts is bigger than the individual parts. And sometimes it's about finding out when is it better to tell a story through sound or through visuals or through interactions, so you don't crank the same message through all the sensory channels we have available. So you choreograph it, and it's a bit of an art to weave this choreography strategically through. The fourth point is really to empowering agency and participation for the audience, enabling play and giving the audience a space to contribute and not over control it, right? We can't expect co-creation if they don't have space to offer themselves into the experience. So it's really for us to manage serendipity, and we can design things almost as a jumping off board, but then we also need to give them space so they can fill it and they feel like they contribute in a valuable way. The last point is really inclusivity and diversity, the importance of reaching diverse audiences, designing for multi-generations and different cultures. Often the immersive experiences that I get, the audience is like everybody, you know, it has to work for young and old, even though we divide it into like skimmers, swimmers, and divers for different engagement levels. I usually get a really wide demographic. And in that, when I envision immersive wellness in the future, I see it with optimized environments to elicit emotions. I like to deploy neuroaesthetics, but really crafting more than pretty visuals, really crafting these emotional connections and the 5 things I talked about earlier. In urban environments where it's harder to get into nature, we could incorporate natural elements. It's nice to incorporate natural elements like rain or water if we get the opportunity to. And sometimes it's nice to have individual opportunities, perhaps for meditation, as well as shared relaxation and social spaces, you know, leveraging immersive experiences as social hubs or points of reflection. And I also really like the opportunity of developing more outdoor environments, maybe with relaxing visuals, and at the same time stimulating our imagination to be in environments we normally couldn't be in. For example, like coral landscapes, you know, we could be designing almost psychedelic environments as physical environments to have the audiences in there to make them dream and give them creative surroundings to bounce against in their minds. Yeah. And with that, thank you for letting me present. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do so here. And I'm really excited to discussing this with you. And I encourage any questions or for you to share your processes with me and spark conversation.
Hey, Jasmine, I just want to say thank you. I've been taking notes of just little things or like tidbits and valuable things, and just these little like nuggets, like phrases and terms that you just threw out that I've just, well, like each one, like managing serendipity, collective effervescence. Like there's so many of these like great kind of descriptors that you use there that I think, what was it, the one about serendipity? Yeah, look at there, I said that. This is amazing. It makes me wish we had about 3 more hours to talk about like the details of how you prototype and how you test and all this kind of work. I want to invite anybody, just feel free, like if you've got a question in the chat, or if you got a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can kind of open this up to the group, because if you're anything like me, there's going to be a lot of questions here. I'm going to kick it off though, Jasmine, with like a question about prototyping. I really like that you saw the slides of prototyping with people in space. And I found in doing some of this kind of work in the past, like one of the things that organizations struggle with is like, how do you prototype an idea that is multimodal, multisensory, collaborative, has space constraints, budget constraints? Like, how do you begin the prototyping process or planning the prototyping process?
Yeah, the best example for that went, I think in my early career, I once went to Robert Wilson. He has Watermill. It's like his center. He's a theater director, right? And he has this Watermill center. And I was like the video artist. So I was always with him on all his rehearsals. And this guy, he sat there and in 90 minutes, he just cranked out an opera. He had this number system. There were actors that were dressed in cardboard or made weird paper things. And he would count through the thing. And all of a sudden, you do this on 5, you do this on 7, on 8, this happens, on 9, this happens. And then people would improvise some musical thing. And in 90 minutes, he basically had the first draft of an entire opera. And that has always been so inspiring to me that I don't know if there is a special strategy for prototyping. I mean, the LARPers do it, right? They're like, imagine, and here's the castle, and they write on a piece of paper, and this is the entrance to this. And like, it's great if you have a space with props and sets and stuff, but all you really need is, I mean, for stuff with actors, is really your imagination and maybe a couple of props you can improvise, and you can make notes and say, this is this space, this is this space, and you just see what you have, you know. With software, it's more complicated. You need some prototype and some working model, whether it's little tests in Touch Designer or installing it on a screen, so you really see how in real life what the sizing is and how that feels like. So you need a bit more stuff with digital stuff, but I think just starting anywhere is good.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting idea. Sort of like one, the two areas where I get pushback on sort of the design of these experiences is we don't have the budget and we don't have the time. Like it's too complex. But I love this idea of thinking like, what is the lowest fidelity way that you could prototype an experience of meaning?
Yeah.
Very often you could prototype something quickly using actors as a proxy for an interface or a projection or something like that. That's so interesting. Let's see. I see a hand up. Paula Dos Santos Papel.
Well done, Brad. The, uh, the pronunciation can be in various forms depending on your language. Jasmin, thank you so much. This was a really wonderful presentation. I learned so much. I'm actually designing an interactive spatial audio space, and I was curious about the way in which you approach evergreen spaces for longevity. So how do you, for context, the space that I'm looking to design is going to be a learning space for different people in one language, but of different ages. So the skimmers, swimmers, and divers, as you put it. But looking at different methodologies of different exercises within a change management methodology, and it will be designing with biophilic elements. So it's a slightly different way of looking at how we envision change management. But I'm curious, how do you design, or what are some tips that you would suggest for envisioning over time changes to the curriculum in each pod, shall we say? I'm designing different types of pods.
What a cool project. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
it's a really cool one. It is.
Yeah, it reminds me, I once did a project with AVNC for Sotheby's where we designed the digital signage. 2x4 was involved as well. We designed the digital signage for Sotheby's. So there was a day parting. So Sotheby's has these screens inside their headquarters in New York. And on these screens, it's a 24/7, it's an evergreen system that features certain paintings, certain ads to other spaces and things like that. So you said you had multiple audiences ranging from kids to adults. I would probably start at what time is who in the building, you know, the kids, are they there more in the afternoon, and when are the adults there more in the evening? And then if the screens are going at those times, I would target the content on the screens for these groups, right? And you
So
could,
just another context, they won't be physical screens. It'll be you know how like we're in Zoom. It's an interactive Zoom-like environment where you can move around and there's spatial audio. But it's not a metaverse. So it's in between what we are right now and metaverse spaces. But it's much more interactive, and it allows for embedding of sounds, nature sounds, there are frames where you can embed movable GIFs. And so it's a very useful way of embedding information. There are frames also that point to different web pages for that learning process. And then, you know, interactive elements that where you click on an object and some questions pop up for your reflection, journaling, etc. Anyway, so it's based on U theory and IDG. I don't know if you're familiar with inner development goals. But U theory, change management. So it's a totally virtual platform that we're using, but the content will change, and the population base, they're adults, but they are young adults to as old as as any learner can be.
I see, I see. Well, I think for something like that, I would figure out, what do you want to write with the outcome first? What do you want to achieve with the change management? And therefore, what interactions do you need to put in there for people to get there emotionally? And then what content do you need to feature in order for people to have those interactions? So perhaps that could be a starting point.
I was curious about your immersive visual choices, but I really appreciate your answering. Perhaps we can do this offline, have a further conversation.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, well, I think following up on LinkedIn or the platform of your choice would be great. Loads of great questions showing up here. Somebody suggested that this maybe there needs to be a part 2 of this conversation. Jasmin, I don't know if you're down for that. Quick show of hands, or just maybe throw a +1 in the chat. I have an idea. What do people think about a workshop around the design of immersive experiences, maybe the planning, conceptual development? If that's of interest, yep, okay, cool, great. I just wanted to get that on the record for Josh when he's back from vacation. He can start planning that out. Jasmin, it looks like you're now committed. There's a couple questions also from people in the chat. I'm just going to paraphrase about, do you have any advice for people who want to get into sort of immersive or experiential design? Like, how do they prepare a portfolio to demonstrate that they can contribute to this kind of work?
Yeah. I think in a portfolio, people really want to see your thinking. People don't want to see necessarily, especially if you're a starter in the industry, they don't want to see flashy finished projects. So it's really whether you mock things up in Photoshop or in Midjourney, but really they will look at the arcs, they will look at the outcome, how are you moving the needle with that experience? And they will look at the guest journeys, and then at a suggested couple of activations, how do people participate? What can they do? Why would they remember it? So as long as you have some sort of presentation deck and you nail those 5 points, then I think that should open doors.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I'm going to dive into the chat as well. Randy Gonzalez has a great question here. I got some thumbs up. Randy, you want to jump on mic and ask it, or I'm happy to read it? If you're there. All right, I might just dive into it. Basically, it says, thank you, Jasmin. My question here, given your extensive experience and observation of various immersive experiences over the last 2 years, what are the top 5 pitfalls or common mistakes that creators should avoid when designing an immersive experience?
Ooh.
Right? That's a good one.
Oh, I know. One is, I think for any immersive experience, the onboarding is so important. If you don't get people in the right space, they can't share. You can't, I don't know, I recently went to Mercer Labs here in New York. It's a new art and technology museum. And what I liked about it is they actually have a little onboarding room. It's just like this round room with one little projection where you put these little museum slippers on. But man, I enjoyed just sitting there and getting out of my New York day and sort of transitioning into viewing art. I sometimes struggle with that. If I go to the Met and I go to the Egyptian section, I come out of my busy New York day and whoo, here are the mummies. It's kind of it's tough to go from one intense thing into another. So really having a space and getting them onboarded, sort of wiping their canvas clean and getting them ready for the experience. Because when they're still busy with stuff, they can't absorb anymore, So I find that is a really important thing. And then Yeah, getting them to participate. How do you get the audience engaged? How do you get them hooked in the right way, right? Are there things, who was this who shared? Lance Weiler, he was great. He recently made an experience where he leaves broken things because he knows people will gather together and fix it. And these little hooks to get people to participate are really clever. Like, how do you seed things in there so people participate? How do you get that interest going? And then how do you emotionally connect them through the content? They do need to understand the story. Like, that's one thing about Disney. You go to stuff, you can summarize the story of every activation in one sentence. If people miss the story, and the story Bibles are like 300 pages and ultra complicated stuff, they go there, they're like, oh yeah, it all look cool, but what is it about? I think being able to summarize the storyline simplistically enough, at least the first layer of the story, that your demographic, if it's a big vanilla audience or more specific audiences, that they get it. Then you can layer more complicated stuff in there, but the basic stuff, everybody should get it and be able to summarize it in one sentence. I think that's important. And then the other one is that people see themselves represented in your show. Like, if I craft a show for diverse audiences, my actors need to be diverse. People need to see themselves in there, right? If I say I craft a diverse audience and then I got a white crew in there, that's not going to work. That's not authentic. So, and whether that's software, people that you show in the content, or whether that's performers, I think that counts universally. 5. Oh, yeah. I really like reflection zones. And so far, the only one that does that really well, I think, is The Dream Machine by Jennifer Crook. So she has a space. She kind of has a semi-psychedelic experience without any substitutes. But you come out and you draw what you've seen. So she induces these hallucinations into people's heads. You come out and you draw what you've seen. And it worked for everybody. I was there with the WXO group. There were a bunch of extroverts who immediately start talking, but there were also a bunch of introverts who just draw. They don't say a beat, but they draw. And after 10 minutes, they had these intricate drawings. And then there was one lady who got emotional and cried. But having these reflection zones where people can digest what they've just seen. I'm sure you guys have had it. You see a really good movie, you come out of the theater, and somebody asks you immediately, oh, so what did you think? And you can't quite talk yet. You need that little moment. You need to sit somewhere in a bar, whatever, have a little drink, and wait until the emotion sort of bubbles up in you and can be worded. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about that as you were talking too. One of the things that really struck me about like the Pandora experience is like there's a lot of experiences that did not seem complex. They were like deep, focused experiences as opposed to like really complex systems that the visitors feel like they need to manage. Let's see, Jay Pearl, your hand has been up for a little while.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Brad. Hi,
Hey, Jay.
Jasmine. Hi. I am currently an immersive experience designer at PBK. I actually was previously at Gensler, and I'm kind of at the mid stage of my career, working in this field and working in this space. And right now, I've been placed in a new position where I'm looking to develop process, where I'm trying to kind of orient our our design process. And what I really liked about your talk, Jasmine, is how you were really outlining the kind of the visitor journeys and experiences and mapping those and translating the existing experience into the new experience. And I'm wondering, when you go through that process, how does that inform and organize the various number of modalities that you then execute upon? And how do you kind of like manage the constraints of that? So like with the Avatar project, there were so many different modes, so many different activations. And when you're mapping out those journeys, how does that then inform the design process? And how do those kind of dovetail between each other to like kind of organize yourself in production?
Do you mean how the space mapping and the development of interactions sort of correlate?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're kind of defining that initial visitor experience and understanding what's happening either now, currently, or even designing the net new experience, how did those kind of interrelate with each other, and how has that process kind of developed over the years for you?
Yeah, that's actually a back and forth. I recently did an experience that's coming out in Las Vegas soon with a musical artist. And we design, oh, let's do this and this and this. And then the scenic designer is like, yeah, forget it. We don't have the square footage for that. And there are toilets right here and the bars over here. We can't do that. So it's constantly working with a physical designer. And it's like, oh, we have to leave this much space here for ADA compliance and we can't get through here, you know. And then I have to take the latest floor plan and try to see how I can fit my bits in there. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't work. And then if I really want to have the interaction in there, I have to go back to the physical designer and go like, man, this is so good. We got to keep it. Can't we put the stairs somewhere else? Or like, so it's like a collaboration. It's like a negotiation until the construction crew says, okay, guys, whatever you got now is what we're building, you know? So yeah. Does that
Yeah,
answer the question?
I definitely, I guess I'm kind of, when you're defining those like experience journeys though at the forefront, I'm assuming then they will shift depending upon like when you're working with that physical designer, when you're working with all of these different kind of collaborators, then you have to kind of go back and revisit, okay, like maybe the activity levels are actually shifting here versus here. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
it's kind of iterative is kind of what I'm understanding.
Yeah, it is iterative to one degree, but at some point the client will have bought into the narrative arc, right? And then you're like, well, unless construction really can't deal with this, this is kind of what we're doing. So then you have to adjust the space accordingly, because to have an emotional story, this is kind of what you need, you know? So then that becomes the first priority, and the space sort of shifts around that. But yeah, unfortunately, it's all interrelated and can be quite complicated until the end.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks for the question, Jay. We are a minute over. I want to say, Jasmin, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Thank you to all of you for showing up today, bringing your energy and your questions, and super grateful for that. And hopefully we'll see you all next week for a conversation with Ashley Modlise. And again, thank you, Jasmin, so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.